Hello there, my Misfitians, and welcome back to A Coffee with Carrie. So this particular week, I am just going to be upfront with y'all and just be very honest. That's what these videos are meant to basically be, is basically nothing is off limits. So this week I've been feeling a little bit down and a little depressed. You can probably tell by my voice. I have been diagnosed with depression, and I've been suffering from depression for a while now, and I have been working with a counselor to work through that. But this particular week is just a really down week for me. But I did want to put out a video and just be raw and honest with y'all and show you this side of me as well as the perky side of me. But this week is going to be a little bit of a down video. I can just tell, and I don't want to force this persona of like everything's cheery and happy and perky. It's not this week, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes weeks are just not perky and happy, and a lot has happened this week that has just been a down week for me. Just a lot of outside things that have happened this week that I had no control over, and they've really affected my mood. And I know that happens with some of y'all, and so I just wanted to kind of share with you, you're not alone. I especially need that sometimes, to know that message that you're not alone. And sometimes life can be just pretty sucky. So anyway, that being said, let's go ahead and get into this video. I did want to make a video, like I said earlier. I wanted to respond to your comments from the last Coffee with Carrie. And first off, I want to say I read all of the comments that were left. Please make sure to leave comments on these videos as well as the main channel videos. I am reading those and picking different comments from both of those videos for this particular series. And I just want to say these comments really did cheer my heart. Even though y'all didn't know that I was down this week, it was really nice reading these particular comments. So the question that I asked is like, what's your favorite last week? The question I asked last week was, what was your favorite watercolor chart that you would either like to do or that you have done and you really like to do? And most of the comments were mixing charts, which is no surprise because I think mixing charts is probably the most common watercolor chart that almost everyone has to do. I read one comment, and I want to read this first, that I thought was really, really funny. Fuzzy Dragons said, I don't have the patience to make charts, LOL. I had to do them in college and hated every minute of them. And I can totally understand that. There are certain things that I had to do in college that I would not do now because it was drilled into me. You have to do it this way and you have to do it only this way. And it was basically an educational standpoint. And it was just pressed on me so hard that now I look at those with just dread and stuff like that. So one thing that we had to do in college that I still look at with dread is in a drawing class, we had to do circles over and over and over and over again for 3 hours. We had to draw circles. And basically the instructor would put a circle on the board and we would have to copy it. And he would rate us, or basically grade us, on how close we got to his particular circle. It's great. That activity is great for learning how to draw basically anything, because circles are almost in anything, especially in anatomy. He was basically preparing us to draw anatomy and also still lives. But to this day, that particular activity gives me a little bit of trauma in that I'm like, I don't want to do that again. So I can relate to your comment totally. With mixing charts, I never had to do those regimentally, basically. So to me, it was a fun activity, but I know some people are like, oh, I can't stand those. So I thought that was a funny, not really funny, but an interesting comment that we have different perspectives on that. Grace said, always a joy to see you. Thank you for your sweet presence and encouragement. Thank you so much, Grace. I needed that this week. All the best to you, dear. How do you approach basic swatching would be great. So how I approach basic swatching, I think what you're saying is like with values specifically would be what I consider basic swatching. And I have a whole, actually, I filmed all this week, a whole course. It's a mini course, but it's over, I think it's like 40 minutes long of how I actually do all the individual things for a value chart. I really wanted to put that together. And for those of you, you might have noticed my newer videos, I'm turning off ads to just get more of that old YouTube vibe. So I'm not making any commission off of these newer videos, but I am trying to sell little mini courses. So if you want to help support the channel, go and buy those little mini courses, and that will help support the channel so that I can put out more content like this. But I was putting that together this week actually, and I think one of the things that I didn't realize until I started really swatching it was how important it is to really dilute your colors and gauge your colors correctly. So this is all into paint ratios, which I have another course on that as well, but I am so enamored over and over and over again how paint ratios play such a huge role in watercolor because duh, watercolor is using water. And I've heard so many people tell me, Carrie, I never knew how to break down my colors with water. And if you don't understand how to do that, every single aspect of watercolor is so difficult and so hard. Your gradients are going to be difficult. Your values are going to be difficult. Your color mixing is going to be very difficult. You really have to know how to break down and dilute your colors in order to approach any watercolor chart. And that's the reason why I always start all of my watercolor courses with going into paint ratios, really, because it is such a foundational skill. So I know I didn't answer your full question. That will probably be answered in the course, but that is one key thing that I feel like is so important that you don't hear a lot about, which I find interesting. Let's look at the next question. Joanna said, I am interested in all of the charts you listed. What pushed me into this direction is an interest in double primary palettes and my possibilities within them, what colors to pick for my palette, etc. And I found this comment really interesting because I started doing color mixing charts when I found, basically when I was doing research and gathering books on watercolor, I found it really interesting that every single book I encountered, every single one of them had a different primary color that they listed, and they all listed different ones. And as I started to dig more into that, I started to realize how important primary colors are to basically the foundation of your palette, and how that really does play a key into what color values or color hues that you actually like to paint with. So there is two primary, a lot of people don't realize this, or if they do, they kind of are like, oh wow, that's really interesting. But there are actually two sets of primaries. So there's a traditional set of primaries in watercolor as well as a modern set of primaries. The traditional primaries are light, fast colors, and those have been used for years and years and years. Those typically are a permanent rose or a magenta color, and then a nice cool blue, such as Winsor blue green or a manganese. And then a cool yellow is typically another one, or a neutral yellow. So Winsor yellow I would consider more of a neutral yellow, but cadmium, lemon yellow, or even a lemon yellow basic color would be more of a cool yellow. Those typically are the traditional primaries that a lot of people will kind of drift towards. Those colors might change a little bit based on what the artist prefers, which is perfectly fine. Then the modern primaries would be more neon-y colors, so what I would consider more of a modern take. And those are actually the true primaries if you really get into it and dive into it. But the common for watercolor, the common modern primary colors would be aqua rose, usually a lemon yellow, and then a very bright blue such as manganese blue. But those are the true primaries, and the way you can tell those are the true primaries is because if you look inside of a printer, what colors do you see? You see a bright pink magenta, you see cyan, which is a bright blue, and then you see a bright cool yellow. Those are the three colors that they tend to use inside of a printer, and those would be the true primary colors. The problem with watercolor is aqua rose specifically is not light fast. So if you're mixing with that particular color, your colors are going to fade over time. And so that's another reason why some artists stay away from the modern primaries. But if you eliminate that whole set or even that one color, you're really limiting your color palette a lot. And so in my opinion, include that color, include those modern primaries, and do a color mixing chart and then see what kind of colors you get from those and if you can get anything close to it with your traditional primaries if you want to go more of the light fast route. It is going to be extremely difficult to get really nice pretty purples as well as really beautiful light oranges colors, neon-y oranges, if you do not have that aqua rose. So I totally agree. Color mixing really does help when you are using basically your two sets of primaries and exploring what's available in that particular realm. Susan DeLay is going to be our next comment. She said, I haven't done any charts yet. I think I would like to begin with creating a color mixing chart, but would love to do all of the charts that you mentioned. I would recommend you start with a values chart because if you're doing a color mixing chart, this is one thing that I'm going to say about color mixing, it can become very, very overwhelming very quickly. So do a values chart first and kind of evaluate what colors you actually want to include in that mixing chart. So limit your colors as much as possible so that that color mixing chart doesn't become as overwhelming. So hopefully that's a little help for you. Value charts are so simple and so easy to do. I did one just this week that took literally probably an hour max, and that was me teaching while I went through it. So they can be done really, really quickly. And they're a really great way to evaluate what colors you actually want to include in your color mixing chart. Because if you start to get into color mixing charts that have 30 colors, it gets very overwhelming very, very quickly. So trying to limit those down to like 12, 6, 12, or even just trying to keep them as low as possible, like 16 is probably, I have done mixing charts that have been 40 colors and it really bogs you down really, really quickly. So try and keep those colors as low as possible. When you're doing your color mixing chart will help you in the long run and it will keep you from becoming discouraged very, very quickly. And I think that's all the comments that I'm going to do for this particular week. Please make sure to comment down below. This time I want to ask the question, what is the most helpful watercolor tip or even art tip that you have received or even discovered along your art journey? I kind of mentioned one of mine earlier in the video, but I'll save another one for the next video for you guys. Last video, I asked about what watercolor mixing charts do you really enjoy to do. For me, I think my favorite one to do, the most relaxing but yet really, really cool, is doing a color wheel. So something like this over here, doing a color mixing wheel and then pulling it down into values. That's a lot of fun and it just always is interesting seeing the colors that you can get from it. So that would be one of the ones that I really, really enjoy doing. Values is another one that I really enjoy doing. Color mixing, like I said earlier, can become very overwhelming very quickly, unless you have a limited palette, but it is so informative. So I think out of all my charts, color mixing would actually be one of my least favorite because it just takes so much effort to put it together, but it's so informative and so helpful that it's worth every second that you put into that and every minute. So, and I'm actually going to be creating a new color mixing chart soon, and I've been a little bit dreading it because it is going to take a lot of time and I need to do 30 colors, and I'm a little bit overwhelmed with that. I need to try and limit it down to 12, but I want to do that as a resource for you guys so that you can see exactly what my color palette does in the future. And I'm going to put together a whole little course related to that and share with you my color mixing chart. So that's something to look forward to. Yeah, and I think that's it for this particular video. So I look forward to your comments, and make sure to like this video and share it with others so they can enjoy this type of little conversational time together as well. Lots of love, guys. Bye.